I don't think there's ever been a more important spring meeting session than what's coming up here at the end of this month. The spring meetings, the SEC spring meetings in Destin are going to be huge. So many important college athletics topics, including college football, name, image, and likeness, and a whole lot more will be discussed. And it's wild. It is wacky. We'll tell you exactly what's going to be discussed right here on a Thursday, Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good Thursday, everybody. Welcome into it. This is Locked On Vols, and I am your host, Eric Kane. Glad that you guys could join me here on this Thursday. You can find this podcast anywhere you find your podcast, including YouTube, but also the audio platforms, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Odyssey app, and a whole lot more. I'm Eric Kane, _Kaner on Twitter, at Locked On Vols as well. I do radio in Knoxville, Tennessee at 99.1 The Sports Animal. I write for the rival side covering Tennessee Volunteers football, basketball, baseball, and recruiting. That is at volquest.com. If you're new to the show, hope you stay around. Hope you enjoy, what you're finding. And please hit that subscribe button, rate and review. Give me 5 stars and interact in the YouTube comments. All that is very, very much appreciated. All right, so some news hit, some reports hit earlier this week. One from Ross Dellinger of Sports Illustrated, the other from Pete Thamel of ESPN. And they are wild. They are outrageous, if you will. And I wanted to let it marinate a little bit, simmer there for a couple of days before I brought it onto the podcast. I'm sure you've seen it on social media. I'm sure you've heard it on your local talk radio stations. If you're a sports follower, this is not going to be news to you because, again, it's a couple of days old. But let's go ahead and talk about it. The SEC spring meetings coming up here in just a couple of days, really, at the end of this month. And some major topics to be discussed. First, the future scheduling format of the Southeastern Conference once Texas and Oklahoma joins the fray. All right, it's there's been a couple different procedures thrown out there of how things can do it. We discussed it a little bit, adopting the ACC formula or the Pac-12 formula, excuse me, on what it could look like, and the ACC as well. That was a couple of weeks ago, but it's in the fruition now in terms of the SEC is going to have to do something. We'll discuss that here in segment 1. And can the college football playoff take a backseat to an SEC playoff? Well, that is a wild story as well. What would that look like coming up in segment 2? And then Austin Price, VolQuest.com, a colleague of mine, will join the show in segment 3 to get you set for a monster recruiting weekend coming up at the University of Tennessee. So let's go and get into it. Ross Dellinger, earlier this week, came out and said one of the main topics that's going to be discussed, along with name, image, and likeness, and all the other stuff that's going to be discussing at the SEC meetings, will be a scheduling format for the Southeastern Conference. You've got Oklahoma, you got Texas coming into the league in 2025. So obviously, some things are going to have to change. The NCAA gave guidance to where you can scrap divisions now, and that you don't even have to play a conference championship if you don't want to. And so, with that being said, the SEC is looking at a new scheduling format. The two proposed ideas right now that will be discussed at the SEC meetings, according to Ross Dellinger of Sports Illustrated, is a 1-7 format or a 3-6 format. Meaning the 1-7 format would be one permanent opponent each and every year with 7 crossovers from around the SEC. That would be 8 league games. The other being 3-6, 3 permanent opponents, and then 6 rotating opponents from around the SEC each and every year. That would be 9 SEC games. All right. Either way you want to spin it, you're going to be playing every single team from the SEC over a 4-year period. And there's some pros and cons to each and every division you want to put up here. I'm trying out these new headphones. As you guys, if you follow me on Twitter, you noticed that I tweeted that I used the same beat up earbuds from 2012. They finally bit the dust earlier this week, so I'm having to break in a new pair, and they're not forming to my ears the way I would like. So sidebar over. And this is the way it would kind of look like in terms of if you wanted to go the 1-7 or the 3-6 in terms of scheduling. So likely gone would be the divisions, no East or West divisions in the SEC. And the pod systems that were so popular a couple of months ago, I don't think it would look like a pod system as well, does right Ross Dellinger as well. But the big thing is, in terms of the SEC, with everything involved, you've got the cream of the crop in football and baseball, men's basketball and all that. But more so than anything, it's a very diverse group of schools in terms of revenue generated. Sports Illustrated has this these two tiers, if you will, or these top and bottom teams where the SEC is split, and kind of how the SEC would go about the way you want to go about this. And I'll get to that here in a moment. But the SEC in terms would be split in terms of teams with or programs, universities that generate the most revenue and universities that generate lesser revenue. The top would be Alabama, LSU, Auburn, Texas, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Georgia, and Florida. The bottom would be Tennessee. Tennessee's actually in the lesser generated revenue tier, along with South Carolina, Arkansas, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State, along with Missouri. And that's going to be important here because I think the top tier teams would like to play the 9-game conference schedule, the 3-6 model, meaning you pick your 3 permanent, or you don't pick them, the SEC will pick them for you. You have 3 permanent opponents, and then you rotate 6 other SEC games, making that 9 conference games a year. And then, of course, you have the 3 other ones that would fill out your 12-game schedule. I think the bottom tier, or the bottom, grouping, the less revenue generating teams would like to keep it at 8 games. That way you can schedule another out-of-conference game that could have another win on the schedule, if you will. Why are these teams divided the way they are? Well, a number of different things. University presidents, fundraising, athletic director, but also winning. Look at the teams in the top. Alabama wins a lot of games. LSU's won a lot of games. Texas, historically, Texas A&M, they've got a lot of money there. Oklahoma's been a college football playoff team. Georgia's won a national championship. Florida's been in there. And look at the teams in the lesser, at least from a football perspective: Tennessee, South Carolina, Arkansas, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State and Missouri. They've mostly struggled from a football standpoint over the last 10 to 15 years. So why is that important? Well, I think the top tier teams want to go to the 9-game schedule, and you can maybe entice them with saying this. If it's a 9-game conference schedule, the 3-6 model, the top team would then be paired with 2 other teams from the top tier and 1 team from the bottom tier, meaning Alabama in the schedule, or in the hypothesis rather, pointed out by Sports Illustrated, Alabama would be positioned with, let's see here, where is Alabama? With Auburn, who's a top tier team, LSU, who's a top tier team, and then Tennessee. Auburn, again, is in that top tier, would be surrounded with Alabama, Georgia, 2 top tier teams, and then Vanderbilt. Now, the teams in the bottom tier would be surrounded with 2 teams from its same tier and then 1 from the upper tier. Take Tennessee for an example. This is what Sports Illustrated has laid out. Vanderbilt, South Carolina, 2 teams from the bottom tier, and then Alabama from the top tier. Let's look at Arkansas. Arkansas would be with Missouri and Kentucky, and then Texas. Those would be its 3 permanent opponents each and every year. So that would be an enticing factor there. The big thing about the 9-game schedule in the league that's going to be proposed with the 3-6 model, you play 4 SEC games at home every other year, meaning because it would be a 9-game league schedule, it's an odd number. So you can only have 4 1 year of home games and then 5 the next year, 4 home games in 1 year, 5 home games the next year. The easy thing about an 8-game schedule in league play would mean you could split it 4-4 home and away. Other things in terms of the 9-game, you want to see more butts in the seats. You want to see more ticket sales revenue. Season ticket revenues across the league have been dipping here lately, and a lot of that's due to COVID. A lot of that just means you can enjoy the experience more comfortably at home. But if there's another SEC game on the schedule for your favorite team, you're more inclined to re-up your season tickets. You're more inclined to go to the football game. Attendance would likely be through the roof. But from a TV perspective, look back at the 2020 season. It was an all SEC schedule, right? 10-game schedule. And the viewership for those games, everybody at home, was through the freaking roof. So that is an impending incentive for this 9-game conference schedule as well. It also protects the secondary rivals, meaning Tennessee's primary rival is Vanderbilt. Tennessee and Vanderbilt will always be grouped together. Tennessee's secondary rival would be Alabama. And with the 9-game 3-6 model, that would protect both of those. Auburn, or take Ole Miss, for instance. Take Auburn, for instance. Auburn could protect Alabama because it's the Iron Bowl, but then it could also protect Georgia, which it does each and every year, right? Take Alabama, for instance. Auburn, and then it could also protect Tennessee. Of course, that's vice versa of what I just said. But looking at Ole Miss, it would protect the Egg Bowl with Mississippi State, and then it would also protect LSU, which it plays every single year as well. So that's another incentive for the 9-game conference schedule. And another incentive would be for these teams, especially in the lower tier that don't generate as much revenue. you wouldn't have to pay every single year $1 million or up to 500 or $500,000 and maybe even more to buy a group of five game to come in and play, team to come in and play a game to kick off your season. So that would be some incentives there. The incentives for the 8 game schedule would be just an extra non-conference game, which means an extra win, right? And it keeps the primary partners in line, but not the secondary. So any way you want to spend it, it's very interesting to kind of see what this could look like. I think the bulk of the, according to Sports Illustrated, I think the bulk of the team is kind of, or the conference kind of split down the middle here in terms of wanting to go to a 9 game or wanting to go to an 8 game. I think the top tier revenue generators in the SEC, the Alabamas, the Auburns, the A&Ms, the Texas is when they come. They want to go to a 9 game conference schedule. The Missouris, the Kentuckys, the South Carolinas think they want to continue on at an 8 game. So it'll be really interesting to see what this might look like at the SEC spring meetings. And, there's no rush either because, they're not coming into the conference until 2025, right? So we might not hear a resolution coming out of the spring meetings. We might not hear until later in the summer, but those plans do need to be in place for when these 2 teams do join the conference, and that will be made in years in advance. So 8 games, a 1-7 model, meaning for Tennessee, you would keep Vanderbilt's and then you would rotate 7 other opponents every single year, or a 9 game league model, which means you would keep likely Vanderbilt, Alabama, and then somebody else, maybe South Carolina, maybe, maybe somebody else, probably South Carolina makes the most sense, probably not Florida. Which one's more enticing to you? That's what's going to be discussed at the SEC spring meetings amongst a lot of other things as well. So good reporting from Ross Dellinger, who's been all over it this offseason on one of the major topics at the spring meetings coming up at the end of the month at Destin. But also, if you think that's wacky, wait till you get a hold of what the SEC is also going to be talking about. Postseason model for a playoff, but only SEC teams. Stick around. We'll hit that here on next on Locked On Vols. But Built Bars, I love the brownies, but more so than anything, I love the brownie batter. And you can get brownie battered puff bar at built.com now. It's fantastic. I mean, it's a protein bar with a whole new level. It's available right now, and you can go try it out and taste all the delicious different brands and flavors covered in 100% real chocolate, but only 140 calories, 17 grams of protein, 7 grams of sugar, only, it's a 4 net carbs as well. It's like a dessert, really, but really it's a snack. It tastes like a dessert. It feels like a dessert. It feels like a candy bar, but it's not. It's good for you. It tastes well as well. And it's that perfect pick me up for the early afternoon or the dessert to cap off your lunch. So if you want to try the new battered brownie Built Bar Puff or any of the other flavors, you guys know I like cookies and cream. I like a bunch of the other flavors, and they have them all at built.com. And go to built.com right now. And while you're there, put Lock15 and you're going to get 15% off your next order. Promo code Lock15 for 15% off. That is all at built.com. Hey guys, I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Vols your first listen each and every day. And for your next listen, I encourage you to go check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. It's the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available now on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. So we're talking the future of the SEC here, and nothing's going to be set in stone, anytime soon, in my opinion. But these will be the discussions on the table for the SEC spring meetings with the university chancellors, the presidents, the athletic directors, the head coaches, all that and more. That's coming up here at the end of the month in Destin. So we talked about the future scheduling model for the Southeastern Conference. Now, hold on to your seatbelts, okay? Because this is when it gets crazy. The SEC is exploring an opportunity to hold its playoff system, an SEC playoff system, if you will. Now, why is this? Well, Greg Sankey, he's been encouraging for a long time that the College Football Playoff Committee should expand the playoffs from 4 teams to 12 teams. Why is that? Well, the SEC's dominated the college football playoff era. It's dominated, really the last 15 years of national championships. You have multiple championships from multiple teams. Also, the last couple of years, Georgia snuck up there, got a championship. LSU's jumped up there, got a championship. Alabama's been on the steady course for quite some time. So it's more money and it's more exposure for the Southeastern Conference to get more teams in to a bigger field, like a 12-team college football playoff system. Now, we thought that the news would break that the college football playoff would be expanding on the day of the national championship. That, however, did not happen. The talks actually stalled, and the report came out that, hey, the current model is going to be used through 2024, and they're not going to change anything until then. So Greg Sankey is upset. Greg Sankey is not a fan of that. So in my opinion, Greg Sankey's just sitting here saying, okay, you're going to waste my time. We're not going to do that. We're not going to benefit the conference. Okay. I hear you. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go back to my conference and I am going to start hypothesizing a way to branch off and do our own thing. On the table for the SEC spring meetings potentially could be an SEC only playoff system. Okay. It would be an 8-team model. Basically, what would happen would be it would also be a huge revenue generator because the TV exclusive rights would be ridiculous for this. But the bowl games potentially would be impacted. Pete Thamel is the one talking about this at ESPN.com, and Pete Thamel is kind of the Adam Schefter of the college realm, as he just recently moved over to ESPN. I'm sure you've seen it as well. But it would be an 8-team working model. And if you looked at it this past year, there likely wouldn't be divisions. But if you look at it from this past year, like the 8-team playoff field would look like this. The number 1 seed from the East would play the number 4 team from the West in Mississippi State. The number 2 team from the West, Ole Miss, would play the number 3 team from the East, which was Tennessee. The 1 seed from the West, Alabama, would play the 4th seed from the East, which was Missouri, and the 2nd seed from the East, Kentucky, would play the 3rd seed from the West in Arkansas. It would likely start around where the traditional SEC championship game is right now, December 4th, 5th, 6th, somewhere at that weekend, you know what I'm talking about? And then it would start a 4-game or a 4-week SEC playoff, if you will. And then potentially from there, you would have the SEC champion when it's all said and done, could potentially go on and play the winner of the college football playoff championship. And then you could have a true national championship game. That's one formula that's out there right now. Another one would be you just completely separate and you have an SEC champion and then a national champion, if you will. But regardless, you're looking at 15 games. You're looking at 16 games if you play another team from another league for a true national championship. You're looking at 17 games if you have your own SEC playoff system, and then you go on and play in the college football playoff, which is 4 teams right now. So again, there's so many different things we got to look forward to from the future. All this is impacted on what the new college football playoff expansion would look like. But talks have stalled right now, so we don't exactly know what's coming next. And again, you're in no hurry to do this because you have a couple of years to prepare and to kind of plan this out if you are going to do this. But just on the table right now, potentially the SEC could be doing its own playoff system. Wouldn't that be weird? For me, I don't want to see Mississippi State, playing for a chance to be an SEC champion. I don't want to see Missouri. Gosh, Missouri was so trash this past year. I don't want to see Missouri in any type of playoff format. Now, I would love to see Tennessee. I would love to see Kentucky, teams like Arkansas, teams like Ole Miss. That'd be a whole lot of fun to see. But what happens if, say, Georgia stubs its toe in a second round matchup against Ole Miss, or stubs its toe, heck, against, in this model from this past year, Mississippi State. I mean, Will Rogers is a good quarterback. Mike Leach is a great offensive mind. I mean, it could happen, right? Do you really want to take the chance of one of the best teams in the country, if not the best team in the country, falling short, potentially just stubbing its toe in a round 1 matchup in the SEC playoff format? I don't think you would. I don't think this will ever happen. I truly don't believe this will ever happen. I think this is Greg Sankey who is frustrated. I think this is Greg Sankey that's just saying, I'm going to stir the pot a little bit and see what the other conference commissioners, see what the other college football playoff committee members have to say, because they cannot afford to lose the SEC. Revenue generating league because they're good. Eyeballs that come with attendance, TV viewerships, and all that. I think Greg Sankey is just upset because he wants to expand the college football playoffs, and those talks have stalled. So it would be interesting. You could do it that way. I think divisions would be likely gone in this case as well. I don't think you'd have a 1 through 4 seed from the East and a 1 through 4 seed from the West in this. But potentially you could. You could also reseed the whole thing and go 1 through 8, like Alabama at the top and like Missouri at the bottom being the 8 seed, and then kind of go 1-8, 2-7, 3-6, and down the line. But it's something very interesting to think about. Could this happen? Would you be in favor of it? One big hang up and why I don't believe this will happen. Okay, you're looking at 15 games. Well, that's not really out of the ordinary because Georgia, Alabama, the last couple of national champions, they played 15 games when they won it. Of course, you got the 12-game regular season, you have the SEC championship game, then you have the college football playoff semifinal, then the national championship. That's 15 games, okay? But what if you go and you add on a 16th game, in this model, playing the other national championship? What if you had a 17th game playing your 12 games, your 4-game playoff, or your 3-game playoff, and then 2 more to win that college football playoff if it's still intact by then? That's 17 games potentially. I know name, image, and likeness has come in here and it's changed the way we look at college athletes. I understand that. but college athletes are still not employees. So that's one big hang up that I think would not allow this to go into place because you continue to add more games at the amateur level and they're not paid employees. So it'll be interesting. Again, I think all of this is a whole bunch of nothing. I don't believe this will happen at all. I think these are just spitballing ideas, fun things to talk about. And I think more so than anything, I think Greg Sankey's just frustrated. Now, will they spend some time on this at the Destin spring meetings? I'm sure they will. But in terms of importance, I think name, image, and likeness will be at the top. How to regulate that potentially from inside the conference, and then correlating with the leaders of the NCAA, obviously, because every figurehead wants the guardrails to come up because there are none. Number two, I think the future scheduling format for the SEC, and then potentially this is number three or number four down the line. But it's something fun to talk about. An SEC only playoff system. Tennessee would have been in it this year. It would have been fun to watch. Would you be in favor for it? How would it even look like compared to the rest of the Power Fives and the rest of college football? Those are questions that we don't have the answers to right now, but nonetheless, something to think about, something to resonate over, and something to ponder on potentially in the future, 2024 or 2025 and beyond. Could this be a thing? I don't know. We will have to see, certainly. All right, coming up next year on Locked On Vols, Austin Price of Volquest.com is going to join the show because Tennessee has a major recruiting weekend coming up, and Tennessee needs to do well there. So Austin Price of Volquest.com will join us next to preview that right here on Locked On Vols. All right, we got a final segment here of a Thursday Locked On Vols. I am Eric Kane. Thanks so much for joining us here today. And a huge recruiting weekend for the University of Tennessee, what they're calling the Memorial Day weekend premier recruiting event. Only the best of the best in the eyes of Tennessee. Mostly 2023s, a few 2024s, but the guy that has all the answers is Austin Price, VolQuest.com, a colleague and a friend of mine. Austin, what's up, dude?
What's up, buddy? Technically, they're calling it Rocky Topapalooza, but I just refuse to call it that.
I've been referring to it as the Memorial Day weekend premiere event for like a month and a half, so I'm not stopping now. What sets this weekend apart from just a normal junior day? Because they're all big events, but this one's different. What sets this apart?
Well, I don't think there's going to be as much football talk. I think this is going to be a lot of kind of fun, hanging out, family atmosphere, activities. No, don't get me wrong. We all know that they'll eventually. I mean, that it just thinks you can say, "Hey, we're not going to talk a lot of football," and then it inevitably comes back to that. But this is more just to kind of spend time with Josh Heupel, spend time with the position coaches, spend time with other recruits, and so it's a little different in that regard. And I think junior days are more of a car wash. Run them in, run them out, let them get for a small field. This is more of just a one big hangout session on Saturday. And for some of these kids, it's a multi-day visit. So, it's a big weekend. Tennessee's got a lot of talent coming in town, and they'll need to take advantage of it. The biggest thing, Eric, in my opinion, is most of these, all but three, are unofficial visits, and most of them are coming back in June for an official visit. So you're going to potentially see Tennessee twice in a matter of 2 or 3, maybe even 4 weeks, depending on when they officially visit in June. And so Tennessee's got a chance to really build some momentum with some of these players.
A couple of those three that you did mention, though, that will be here visiting officially. A guy that's very high up on the board that a lot of Tennessee fans are asking about, Vic Burley, a couple of offensive linemen, Bryson Sanders with his decision about a month away. He'll be in town again this weekend officially. And then Lucas Simmons, a highly prioritized 4-star offensive tackle. 3 big-time targets to make the most of. But then, again, you got Christian Conyer. Of course, you'll have Nico that'll be here kind of running things. And any way you want to spend it, it's huge. But those 3 who will be here officially, where does Tennessee kind of stand in terms of what do they need to accomplish this weekend?
Well, with Vic Burley, we'll start with him. They've got to make up some ground. They're behind Clemson. Feels like Vic's going to make a decision sometime before the season, but yet he's not going to officially visit Clemson until the season. That tells me that right now Clemson has got a big lead. And so Tennessee's going to have to try to combat that and see if they can kind of claw back in it. As far as the offensive lineman, Tennessee needs to show well again with Lucas Simmons. They did extremely well when he was here a month ago. Eric, you talked to him. He is a kid that likes Florida State because of relationships, but I don't think he's going to end up there. I think USC is heavily in the mix here. Tennessee is heavily in the mix here. And so, I ultimately think that this comes down to a Tennessee-USC battle. Now, some people say it's USC-Florida State. I just don't see it. I just think Florida State's got too many too many question marks heading into the season for him to pull the trigger early for them. And so I think this is a big weekend of Tennessee's going to be a major player there to kind of build off what you did last month. And then Bryson Sanders, that's a Tennessee LSU battle, much the same. I think getting him here for an official was big because I think he's been here so many times. He was going to go, well, I don't have to waste an official there. I've been there so many times, and what else can I see, blah, blah, blah. It never works out well for any school that has a kid say that. So to get him here officially, I think is big. To be the kind of fire starter for the next, 3 visits over the next month is a good thing in my opinion, and he's set to do something on June 23rd.
All right, lastly, a 2-part question. We'll get you out of the door here. 5-star offensive tackle from IMG. Tennessee very much invested in IMG Academy, at least this cycle for sure. Francis Mauigoa is what I'm saying. I'm sure that's wrong. He will be here for the first time this weekend. And then what's the running back room look like? I get asked that all the time. Not a lot of traction, not a lot of, I guess the word you would say would be juice there right now, but maybe that could change this weekend.
Well, you got Trayon Webb, Jeremiah Cobb, Roderick Robinson. I think Tennessee's best shot there are Webb and Cobb. Robinson feels like he's going to stay on the West Coast, at least initially. And then and it seems like Tennessee's got most traction with Cobb. That's a Tennessee-Auburn battle. Webb's a Tennessee-Florida battle. But it's just hard for people to, nobody that's following the Webb recruitment feels like he's going to go anywhere but Gainesville. Then there's Deshaun Bishop, young man at Carnes, got 1 million carries last year, which is something I think just shied some teams away. Ran for over 3,000 yards in just 11 or 12 games, and was a stone's throw of breaking the state record for yards in a season, which is set by Jalen Hurd. Jalen played 15 games. Deshaun's a kid that's interesting to me just because, what is he really good? Is he just a product of getting all those carries? And, to me, he's that one kind of like flyer, like if you're Tennessee and you feel like, hey, there's not much difference between Deshaun Bishop and Cobb and Webb, I would go Deshaun Bishop.
And then finally, that offensive tackle from IMG. This is a big weekend for him simply because it'll be the first time seeing everything. But I think Tennessee needs to do well just to get in this running to be a serious contender, right?
Yeah, I mean, first visit, you want to set the standard for yourself. You did that with Nico back in November when he visited here. Followed that up with a massive visit in March, and that ends up ultimately getting his commitment. I think they have to do the same thing this weekend. I think having Nico here is a big deal, because he's going to sit there and show Francis all the positives about Tennessee. He's the quarterback, the face of the class, the face of the future. And so, in my opinion, like this is a huge weekend, as Tennessee continues their courtship of Francis. And, if they can set a really solid standard, he's due to come back on an official visit in just a few weeks in the month of June.
Awesome prize, Volquest.com. You and I will be there. We'll have tons of coverage over at Volquest.com all weekend long. Thanks, man.
Appreciate it.
All right, that is AP, does fantastic work. Nobody is better in the recruiting business than Austin Price. That's going to do it here for this Thursday edition of Locked On Vols. Style into a Friday edition. We'll talk a little bit more recruiting and get you set for the weekend. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vols your first listen. Make Locked On NBA Big Board, that podcast, your second listen. Available anywhere you want to on the Odyssey app as well. Locked On NBA Big Board, your second listen, right behind Locked On Vols, your first listen each and every day. Guys, thank you so much. Couldn't do it without you. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, everybody.